Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Joshua Payne, and this is my final social problems portfolio presentation for Sociology 101. And today's date is July 22nd, 2025. Before I get into my introductory statement, I just wanted to briefly describe exactly what white-collar crime is, also known as corporate crime, elite deviancy. These are things that we know, such as fraud, bribery, embezzlement, money laundering, and insider trading. I also wanted to touch base on the general media's overall lax approach to covering most corporate crimes. And my research question that I asked was, how do societal perceptions and biases contribute to the disparity in prosecution, media coverage, and more forgiving attitudes towards corporate and white-collar crime as opposed to more common blue-collar and street crime? I've always felt pretty strongly about this subject. Um, I read a little bit of like Nietzsche in high school, and I was always interested in human evolution as well as the American criminal justice system. I always thought that it was um, apparently unfair and uneven how some of these punishments and treatments of different individuals would vary, especially when you took into consideration the ultra wealthy and more influential members of society and how they usually get um, less harsh punishment than those beneath the poverty line or just lower class people. So I also uncovered quite a bit of research that I wasn't expecting to be so interested in, as well as uncovering psychology and using behavioral red flags to identify possible perpetrators or those that would be more likely to commit these kinds of white-collar crimes, as well as researching new technology and using that, as well as um, data and biomarkers like genes, or even evaluating brain scans to also identify these common traits that these people have that are more likely to commit these kinds of crimes. And I wanted to touch a little base on my mind map as well. And my mind map just talks about corporate crime, a brief history of it, referencing Edwin Sutherland, who is a very well-known American sociologist and criminologist. Became very interested in the subject of white-collar crime after the Industrial Revolution. He was noticing the exponentially growing disparity between the workers and the more wealthier owners. And I also talked a little bit about different research that was um, being brought forth involving this subject, as well as increasing public education and enforcement about these types of crimes, as well as possibly um, talking about criminal justice reforms as well, revolving around punishment, including restricting procedural rights of um, specific individual corporate defendants. I also talked about just different victims and consequences of corporate crime, general underreporting of the media about it, and then just some brief formal definitions that I pulled from Wikipedia as well. And for my bibliography, I referenced quite a few peer-reviewed articles. The first one being from the American Journal of Criminal Law, just talking about possible reforms that we could make in the criminal justice system to further prevent perpetrators of these crimes from getting off so easy. Also, an article about using or increasing research using biomarkers and genes to identify these potential perpetrators of white-collar crime. I also referenced an article just describing corporate offending propensity involving managers and managers in training, as well as how different corporate compliance programs can actually increase or decrease the likelihood of said offenses. And article just examining research and theories on root causes and how American society may even foster white-collar crime. And for my popular sources, I chose an article from Reuters, just briefly describing how recent legislation changes and decreases of regulations will more than likely enable more white-collar crime, as well as an article that I read about an ex-president of a bank in China receiving a suspended death sentence, which was an interesting article, and I thought I would highlight that because it was such a disparity in punishment than we're used to seeing here in Western nations. I also want to touch base briefly about my final artifact, and here's a better view of it. So I just made some images that I generated through Canva's AI program, and I wanted to reference a lot of interesting statistics and data that I pulled from legitimate sources. And I also made a bar graph here, just kind of touching base on the amounts of white-collar prosecutions in the United States, and how from '86, when we really first started measuring the number of these, how it grew over the 10 years, kind of plateaued out, and then recently has been falling, unfortunately. But that was quite a bit of fun to make, and I also listed all my sources here. And finally, just as a reflection, I thought it was really interesting what I ended up researching, because I ended up just jumping in a bunch of rabbit holes and discovering more topics that I'd be interested in, including possibly applying things like psychology and biology to help prevent white-collar crime, which I believe will also help prevent things such as environmental degradation and climate change. So I had a great deal of fun and wonder researching this topic, and I hope everybody enjoyed my presentation. Thank you very much.